There are so many incredible adventure films out there, but it's not every day that I watch one and it absolutely blows my mind. But the other day I was just scrolling through some content and I found this short skiing film that was quite literally breathtaking, and so I thought it deserved a little bit of a breakdown just to talk about what techniques they used and what worked really, really well to create such an encapsulating and powerful film. So let's jump into it. So the film I'm talking about is called Suspended in Space, and it is a film by the production company Native 4, which does some pretty cool stuff. The sound design in this short film is so powerful. There's just so many examples I can show you of how great it is, and it's hard to kind of demonstrate because it is that good, but it just really ebbs and flows so nicely with the visuals and creates a really profound experience that gave me chills, honestly, the first time I saw it.
Towards new goals.
And that's along with the music as well, which is this kind of ambient tone. There's just these really fantastic build-ups that release so nicely and just give you all the feels. A concept I keep coming back to with this film is the idea of enhanced reality, which is something I always try and strive for with filmmaking because that's essentially what it is. But everything feels grounded in reality, but it's enhanced to a level that's not quite real, but it's not unreal enough that we really dissociate from it, so it just makes it feel so good. And I think that's very true about the sound design here. It's definitely not realistic if you hear the sounds, and if you do the sports like skiing, it doesn't really sound like that. But it looks like how it should sound, if that makes sense, and that makes it really enjoyable to listen to. I think this is my favorite bit of sound design. Basically, when the helicopter moves in, the second that the air hits the snow, they just have this insane, powerful sound that's almost like a dragon breathing fire or something. I don't know, but it sounds really cool and just so epic. And then it cuts inside to all these nice particulate sounds, which are really crispy and nice. And something additional that I think is worth noting is that this story really uses very little dialogue. There's a couple moments where they have spoken words, but for the most part, it's just letting the visuals and sound design do the storytelling, which I always love. That's just a great strategy. If you don't need words, don't use words. But that being said, where they did include sound design in this piece, it's almost like it has reverb or echo to it. It just has this really nice room feel where it feels like it's bigger than the environment itself.
What are your first impressions of the Yukon?
Stillness.
And yeah, I think it's a really great sound for voiceover that's just so unique. Alright, so next up, let's talk about the colors in this film because, oh my god, it was so beautiful the first time I watched it. I was just blown away by these colors. And I looked it up after the fact, and unsurprisingly, it's done by Company 3, who does some of the best color in the industry. Pretty much anything you look at that looks beautiful was done by Company 3, so no surprises there, but it's just such a beautiful look that, again, is surreal but grounded in reality. So I want to look at a couple frames here and talk about what I mean. The first thing you're going to notice about this film is how blue it is because it is a winter film, but it's definitely bluer than real life. I mean, snow is normally white, and if we look at these waveforms inside of DaVinci, you can see that it really is quite blue. Yeah, just looking at all these frames, there's a very blue hue to it, but again, like, it feels realistic enough to not be distracting, and I enjoy it. I always find the best tool to really figure out how to color grade better is to analyze other people's stills, especially in DaVinci where you can actually see the waveform. And in this short, you can see how they really utilize the entire light spectrum. So in this shot, for example, I mean, the highlights are clipping at 100 and the shadows go all the way down to 0. So it's a really contrasty image using the entire range of dynamic range for a display. But it doesn't look that contrasty. I think they really lifted the midtones and just gave it such a nice balanced look. So yeah, you can really see they're just using the entire spectrum of light here, but it looks great. Sometimes if your highlights go all the way to 100, it can seem really bright with the image, but these look extremely balanced. Like this shot right here in the dark, it makes sense, but the brightness only goes up to 40 IRE, which is really dark, and it's just a nice combo. It also looks like they added a bit of grain to this image, probably some 35mm emulation to it, but yeah, nothing crazy, just nice images. And while we're here, let's just talk about the skin tones real quick because I always like to analyze them, see what people are doing. So I'm gonna throw on a DCTL to this shot to look at this skin tone, and you can see that this is showing me it's very magenta, which, you know, usually you try and balance your skin tones out or you wanna match them to the environment, but here obviously it's sunset, so very magenta skin tones, but it looks so beautiful. I mean, when you turn this off, it's just a stunning shot. If we tried to correct this, for instance, by adding a little bit of green to it and then turning that off, like, the skin tones are technically balanced now, but it just doesn't look as good as when it's all magenta. Let's look at the skin tones one more time for this inside shot, and if I turn on the DCTL, you can see that it is very yellow, which means that they're accurate skin tones, even though it's pretty warm. So they do have a mixture of less realistic skin tones and realistic skin tones. It's really just the environment you're in, right? Like if you don't have white light, the skin tones aren't gonna be the exact tone that skin should be, so you gotta match it and make it look realistic, and I think the colorists did a fantastic job here. So really the main color scheme in this short film is blue and magenta, and you can really see those colors play out in most of these shots here. So next up, I want to talk about the cinematography of this piece, which in conjunction with the sound design and color grade is just so dang tasty. It was shot by Christopher Clark on the red V Raptor, and they used Olympus OM vintage lenses that were rehoused, I believe, but I think it was a great choice. The image is sharp, but it has a little bit of a softened feeling due to the vintage glass, which I always love. You know I'm a sucker for that, so I think it looks fantastic. And I believe they said they had a range from 18 to 200 millimeters or something like that on the Olympus OM, so lots of versatility in terms of lenses. So I think my biggest takeaway in terms of cinematography when looking at this film is just the combination of slow motion and fast motion. They shot some really slow motion sequences on the red that almost look like 400, 500 frames per second. I don't know exactly what it shoots, but just such beautiful moments, and that in conjunction with super fast paced motion blurry shots that are handheld and kind of jerky looks so great. It's just a nice contrast where you have that fast and slow, and I think it looked really great in this film. And it's also just a great combination of shot types. So you have your wide shots, mediums, close-ups. You just got to remember to get all of those, and then in editing, you're able to pair them together into something that makes sense. And they also use some other different strategies, like some wider shots, some low-angle stuff, maybe some Dutch angle, I don't know, but pretty great. Some of these shots honestly just blew me away. Like the one with the ski slicing through the snow in slow motion is just so breathtaking. And personally, I know how hard it is to shoot in these environments because I do a decent amount of stuff like that, and it's definitely not easy, so big time kudos to the cinematographer. This FPV shot is one of the coolest I've seen, coming down over the mountain straight into the skiers from the top down. It's like, oh my God. And then it cuts from here to a little bit of a close-up, and then you have this super cool lower angle drone shot of the two of them making matching turns. It's like, come on, so cool. Something I'm also a really big fan of with the cinematography in this piece is the use of particulates. So basically anything on your screen that abstracts it. So flaring, and then also just water particles. And so you can see in a shot like this, like all this texture that it adds to the screen is just so nice. Like, oh my God. I mean, I don't know if I'm just a sucker for that, but I think it looks beautiful. And then lastly, we just got to talk about the editing because they did something pretty sweet here. If you look at the actual timeline in DaVinci chopped up by the length of the shots, you can see that there's this interesting pacing flow where it goes from shortcuts to slow and long to fast to slow and long, and just that change of pace throughout a film is really what makes you interested and keeps you engaged. And I think this is a great example of that. Like right here in this sequence, you can see how many quick cuts there are. It's not the most interesting thing, like they're just gearing up, but because of the quick cuts, you're staying more engaged. And then they cut to this nice exiting shot, and then some really large wides, slow motion, and then boom, hyped up. So yeah, it's just a really nice combination of slow and fast, and that's what makes a film engaging. And I really like how at the ending, they just leave it on this really slow, long frame that kind of allows you to process what you just witnessed. And it really worked, I gotta tell you. So yeah, that's pretty much all there is to analyze. Again, I just think this is such a great film because it is so engaging and you really can't look away, even though the action of the film is actually pretty limited. Like the actual time spent skiing in the movie is not very many minutes. I think it's probably less than a third of it. Most of it is just the getting ready in the actual environment, but because of the music, sound design, cinematography, and pacing, it just feels like you're engaged and in action the entire time, and you're just waiting for that next build-up to happen. And It's just a pretty perfect payoff, and if I was the client of this film, I would be very, very stoked. So great work to everyone involved. I know this video was a bit different than normal, but I always find that analyzing short films like this gives me motivation and ideas like nothing else. So if you want to see more like this, let me know in the comments down below. It's always fun to make, and yeah, I'll see you guys next time.